Hi guys, I'm just recording this in my spare room because the kids in the creche next door are screaming their lungs out, so don't want to have all that excess noise happening. Bored off my brains as usual with all the confinement happening at the moment, but I have managed to catch up with a few things on the big screen. It was fortuitous that I bought that large TV just before all the madness has taken place with social distancing, so at least I was prepared with my entertainment setup, and the sound system and the big screen have worked fairly well. But one thing I caught up with, which has caused a bit of a minor sensation in the US in recent times, and probably globally, is a show called Tiger King. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but it is really big over in the US. And it's an interesting documentary. It actually took the doco makers 5 years to produce. Basically, it centres around a feud between big cat owners. There's one that's actually paints herself as being the Mother Teresa of the big cat society, with a sort of a big cat rescue place. But I have my doubts about the total veracity of that portrayal. I think she plays the political line very well, and whether I actually believe her, well, there's a lot of question marks on that. These people charge customers to come through, by the way. It's not a charitable organisation at all. They all make money out of this, so straight away you can question their motives. Calls himself Joe Exotic, and he's an interesting character to say the least. He's actually a openly gay guy who dresses in gorish outfits, but ran a big cat safari type park, and he got into this huge feud with the woman that I mentioned earlier, Carol Baskin, who is the social justice warrior of the story, that she's basically promotes herself as being the great conservationist and looking after the big cats, but they both seem to be motivated by making money as well as each other. There's a huge feud between them because Carol Baskin's trying to shut down Joe's operation, found it distasteful. He's a gay redneck, an interesting character to say the least. Total extrovert, a publicity seeker. Mind you, I don't think Carol's that dissimilar in that way. She's just more genteel, and her and her husband have sort of have been sparring with Joe for many years, and the doco makers say that when they actually shot footage at both of these places, all these people could talk about was their nemesis in the other park. So this feud sort of formed the basis of their documentary, as it turned out. It wasn't their intention to make it a film with that sort of content. It ends up being a true crime content because Joe accuses Carol, who's had the 3 husbands, and she's on to a 3rd husband, of actually killing the 2nd husband because he disappeared without trace many years ago. So it's that adds a lot of spice to the thing, and the feud gets to the stage. These are, well, I'll put a spoiler alert at the beginning of this because I'm giving away a bit of the plot. I can't avoid it. If I want to talk about this, I have to mention what actually occurred with the narrative. It gets to the stage where Joe actually tries to organise a hitman to bump off Carol. That's how deep the animosity is between these people. And added to that, there's another character who's also has an interesting lifestyle. He's got a whole group of girls, a harem in effect, and he's more low profile. It's a bit more upmarket animal park, and he doesn't. He's very much guarded, according to the doco filmmakers. I saw a documentary actually about those people who actually made Tiger King, about the people who directed it and produced it, and it was quite interesting to get their perspective on it all. But they said, no, this other character was very guarded in what he said, whereas Joe is just out there all the time. And Carol Baskins, she's on message, but she's always pushing her cause. So she knows what the script to follow. So I didn't find any of these people particularly alluring. Oh, the other thing I forgot to mention about Joe Exotic is not only is he openly gay, but he also has 3 husbands, or at least had 3 husbands, because now he's actually at the pleasure of the governor. He's in 4 walls and locked away for 22 years because of this conspiracy to bump off Carol Baskin. So it's a fairly unhappy ending for him. And the actual producers believe that, the doco producers believe that he got a pretty harsh sentence and would have done much better if he'd had a decent lawyer. And isn't that always seems to be the case, especially in America with the legal system, but in the West in general. So I didn't find any of these people particularly appealing, but it is a bit of a train wreck, and you're like a animal in the headlights, and you can't sort of look away. You know, it's so bizarre, this series. I think it was a bit long. I think they could have made it much shorter personally, but I suppose we put 5 years of your life into it. You want to get a bit of return for all your efforts. So it shows how difficult doco making is, and how much is required, how much determination is required to see it through. So this actual, I'll put a link in for this documentary of the documentary makers, because I think it's quite interesting to get their perspective. It's not a long YouTube video, so I think it's well worth watching. The director was a woman, and she said that she felt that there had been some level of cruelty towards the animals by Joe, so she didn't have that much sympathy for him. So she didn't specify what she meant by that. I know that they did dig up some skeletons of big cats on the property, and I'm not sure what the actual connection was there. I probably should have looked closer at the doco, but yeah, it's an interesting, convoluted story, and certainly fascinating to watch. But not super pleasant at times, because like I say, some very sketchy characters throughout the whole documentary, but I guess they make good TV. I also saw this incredibly cheesy 1958 sci-fi called Queen of Outer Space, and guess who it starred? Zsa Zsa Gabor. That's a name that always is synonymous with quality sci-fi. Not. And yeah, this was a ludicrous film. It's actually so bad it actually is entertaining. I've got a bit of a sick sense of humour when it comes to these sorts of films. I like Plan 9 from Outer Space, and A Queen of Outer Space is pretty out there itself. It's got some pretty cheesy elements to it, and yeah, the whole, all the scientific basis of it is turned on its head, of course, for expediency. They use hand-me-downs from Forbidden Planet as far as the costumes are concerned. You could tell them straight away. I mean, Forbidden Planet is a really top quality sci-fi, starring Leslie Nielsen of all people, and playing a straight role, which he did for most of his career prior to him breaking out to a comedy later on. But that's a really good, innovative film. It's such a rip-off, not only with the costumes, they even use the style of credits at the end. It's got a curving style with the credits, and they use exactly that same technique, maybe like a homage to Forbidden Planet. But Forbidden Planet was the only big-budget sci-fi that MGM ever made, or at least at that stage in the mid-50s. It was certainly a breakthrough for them as a studio, trying a different genre. They'd never done sci-fi prior to that, and they spent up big, and it does look great. I mean, some of the matting and what have you looks a bit funny by today's standards. I mean, but you know, when you consider when it was made, I think it holds up extremely well, and it's not a bad damn story either. It's quite good. I actually like that film, but Queen of Outer Space is in a totally different category. Forbidden Planet is A grade, and Queen from Outer Space is definitely B grade. Actually, Zsa Zsa Gabor put in a fairly restrained performance, but the absurdity is that these you've got 2 people on this really stubby spacecraft, which seems to take about a minute before it even gets off the launch pad. The actual rockets go, and then nothing happens for a minute. It takes before it actually takes off, and then they get into outer space, and of course there's no weightlessness. But then again, they do have an artificial gravity button, so I suppose that sort of covers their arse as far as that's concerned. But it's all sort of very classic, sort of cheap 50s sci-fi type interiors, and exactly what you'd expect. But it gets even more ludicrous when they head to Venus. Well, actually, they don't head to Venus. They were actually going to a space station, but they were waylaid by this beam and dragged along to Venus. This is the same beam that actually destroyed the space station. So why it didn't destroy the spaceship was never explained. But gee, you don't worry about minor plot holes like that in a film like this. It doesn't matter. But they land on this planet, and it's inhabited by totally by women. Mind you, Venus is supposed to be a planet of incredible. Even back then, they knew that it was uninhabitable. It was incredibly hot, had a toxic atmosphere with incredible pressure, impossible place to live. But they landed on it, and it was actually cold. It was ice, covered in ice. They even had the scientists actually say that this is not how the planet's supposed to be. So the actual scientist character was actually giving us the facts of the situation, which undercut the actual narrative of the story. So I thought that was weird. But anyway, so they land. The reason they did that was, well, one, they had to make it a place that's habitable. But the women, they think they lived underground in any case. But they actually used stock footage from another film. They quite happily borrowed stuff from plenty of different films, so that was interesting in itself too. But it was ludicrous. Once you got inside, miraculously they all spoke English because they've been monitoring our media. That's one of the great cliches. And they were all the women looked like Vegas showgirls. Really leggy and short skirts and what have you. I mean, they're very attractive girls. It was quite nice to watch. But the funny thing is the actual antagonists on the planet, the women there, had radiation burns, and they were wearing these ridiculous eyes wide shut type masks, and they were the ones running the planet and the man haters. Basically, it's like watching modern day feminism on Venus. But of course, our heroes escape, and well, they don't actually escape. They actually have to stay there for a year. But considering you're surrounded by beautiful women who just want to grope you, it wasn't a bad ending for them. I don't think you can spoil this film, so I could put a spoiler alert out for both these movies, but I don't think you'd really want to watch that. And speaking of TV shows about women hating men, 3 Busy Debras. And it is one of the worst programs I've ever seen on TV. And it is basically 3 particularly unfunny, untalented, and unattractive actresses basically taking joy out of maiming men. That's what the first episode was. I didn't watch any other episodes. I couldn't be bothered. But there was some, I think they call them busboys over in the US or something like that. He's in the service industry. And they thought it'd be fun to just crush him between 2 cars. They thought that was really funny. That's their idea of black humour. And I like black humour, but this was not funny. It was just sick, man-hating trash. So if you see 3 Busy Debras, it won't be on for long, I don't think. It gets a 4.3 rating on the Internet Movie Database, and I think that's being rather generous. And I'll flash up a couple of reviews here to give you an idea of what other people thought of it. It actually divided people. There were some people actually thought it was good, but you always get that with a lot of shows on the Internet Movie Database, because you'll have the actual cast and crew actually posting stuff on for a lot of films and TV shows to just bolster it, especially ones that aren't that popular, where they can sort of skew the actual score. So the 4.3 I think is being rather generous. I'd be looking at less than 2 for this show. It is absolutely abysmal. And it's not even witty about it. If there's like a man-hating show that had a bit of wit about it, I could actually probably excuse it to some extent, but no, not in this case. So that's what I've been doing. I'm housebound, and I've been watching a lot of the big screen at the moment. So I hope you guys are coping. I hope we do get some relief from this, and I hear that some places are opening up beaches and things, which is good to hear. There's some relaxation of the social isolation, which is basically going throughout the whole world at the moment. So fingers crossed things do start to improve and we haven't totally trashed our economy in the meantime, because that is a great worry for me. So look after yourself, stay safe. Hopefully I'll be able to travel again in a few months, but no guarantees. Please consider subscribing to my channel if you think there's anything there of use to you, or entertainment or whatever. And either do that or give me a thumbs up, or if you're feeling really energetic, do both. That'd be great. But please don't ignore me. That's the worst thing you can do on YouTube, is be ignored.